advantage of the opportunity. But right now is about right now.
The Plan B, Ohio State Buckeyes.
Give everything you got in your heart to this place.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Rushing the Field, presented by Xfinity. He's Joshua Perry. I'm Nicole Auerbach. Cover college football for NBC Sports. You can watch this pod on YouTube. You can listen to it wherever you get your podcast. And we are in the thick of it. Joshua, we are one round into the college football playoff. 4 teams have been eliminated. They have set up 4, I think, really amazing quarterfinal games, which we will get to in just a second. But I guess I don't know what to say. Like, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. Everything is happening this week. Everything is overlapping. We are at that point of the college football postseason. Also, I guess Happy Pop-Tarts Bowl as well, because that is this week.
To those who celebrate the Pop-Tarts Bowl.
We celebrate.
Yes,
that.
Of course we do. We had a holiday party last night. So it's a little bit of a slow-moving morning over here in the Perry household. Had a bunch of fun.
What was the cocktail of choice for this holiday
It
party?
was Manhattans, and that's a tradition on Maddie's side. Her mom's grandmother, so her great-grandmother, that was her drink of choice. And so we batch them, we sip them. There were plenty to be sipped. It was a very fun night, but hopefully everybody's enjoying their holiday season, however they like to celebrate with their families, and hopefully sprinkling in some college football too.
Absolutely. Apologies if there's any background noise. My building, so you're a homeowner for like a standalone home, which I feel like next that will be what we do. We're in an apartment building and they're doing construction, and they have not done construction for over a week because it's been cold, snow, and like 5 minutes before we were about to do a podcast, they're back. So really we should just be scheduling podcasts so we can get this work done. That was my main takeaway here.
I guess
but anyway, apologize.
The part that you didn't say is every time we go to do a podcast, the people around the building decide that it's a great time to work, and it is like the longest running joke between us on this pod.
It drives me crazy. Sometimes you can't hear it, but like I'm like internalizing and very stressed about it every single time. So we will see how much it interferes with today's pod. It's kind of a good background because we're going to talk about like kind of the dud that was the first round of the CFP this year. We're going to talk about like, is it broken? All of the angst that has come in response to these games. Which some of it's in response to 2 games. I think we should talk about all 4 because I don't think there were great games in this round. Yeah, I think like we are going to have some great ones in the quarters and definitely in the semis, and the championship game should be very good. But we got to talk about the first round. We'll do that. I want to do some quick news and notes before we get into the games. We have been tracking on this Michigan search, which Michigan does still not have a coach. It is 9:09 a.m. Central on December 22nd. Michigan still does not have a coach. And it's a little bit unclear where the search is going to go because, you know, we've heard Kalen DeBoer and Kenny Dillingham's name so much around the search. They made logical sense. And Kalen DeBoer won. Alabama beat Oklahoma. So they are in the CFP for another 2 weeks at least, as they are going to face Indiana in the Rose Bowl. And Kenny Dillingham signed his new deal with Arizona State. It will raise his salary to $7.5 million per year. He's also getting additional resources to keep the program competitive on a national level. So there was already works on an indoor football facility. The staff salary pool increased to $11 million, which is near the top of the Big 12. There's also rollover clauses that will keep Kenny Dillingham in place. Some really interesting comments from Arizona State athletic director Graham Rossini. He said to my pal Doug Haller at The Athletic, quote, "I'm tired of the sleeping giant narrative. I'm tired of the concept of, man, they have so much potential. I want us to be the group," meaning the athletic department, coaching staff, fan base, community, that wakes it up once and for all. There's just never been a better time. What do you make of this? What do you make of Kenny Dillingham staying put? I mean, we know his name was associated with Michigan. He said he never got an offer, but he decided to stay at Arizona State, a place that typically would not keep a coach that might have interest by Michigan.
Yeah, so I'll start with the Rossini comment there because I think it's interesting. We talk about this in a football sense. I've made this comment to you before, Nicole, where we talk about players that have so much potential. But then after a while, it's like, okay, we've said you have potential and you haven't lived up to it. So like you're just not a good player. Right. And I think it's really intriguing where he's like, I'm tired of talking about the potential that we have. You know, the school, people want to go there and, you know, they're in a really good area. They've got good high school football, right? Like, you
Not
know,
far
all
from
the different,
Southern
yeah.
California.
No, I mean, like all of the things that you could say, like, oh, this is what you would want to be geographically and from a setup standpoint, and they haven't broken through. I love hearing that because, like, at a certain point, potential is tiring, and you have to figure out a way to become competitive. Now, for Kenny Dillingham to stay, I was talking to a mentor of mine who is a Michigan fan, huge Michigan fan. And after this was announced, he was like, well, you know, do you still think there's a chance? And I'm like, you're crazy. And he's like, why would you turn down 12-13 million dollars a year potentially to go to Michigan and be out of blue blood and all the resources and everything else? And I think it comes down to a handful of things that we had talked about in the earlier cycle. Is number one, expectations, right? And like
Yep.
Arizona State wants to level up, but you go into Michigan and every coach is expected to have elite success there on a national scale. And I don't think Arizona State is quite there. Number two is Dillingham, very intriguing situation, family wise, setup wise. You know, this is a school, he wants to be there. And I don't think you can put a number on that for a lot of people. But number three, and it's the thing that we continue to talk about, there's a path. There's a
Yep.
path. There's a path to a title everywhere now. You can
Yeah.
talk yourself into this idea of all we got to do is win our conference and then we'll be in the mix. And that's all we want to be is in the mix. And I think
Yeah.
that's
And
a really important thing
they
for
should
these
do
guys.
that, right? They should be in
Yeah.
there every year in the mix.
They should,
in the Big
right?
12.
Like the Big 12 is absolutely, it was the James Franklin to Virginia Tech. The first thing you and I said is makes a ton of sense. There's always a path through the ACC, right? So
Yep.
I think that's part of the calculus here is before you had to be at Michigan, Ohio State, at LSU, at Florida to feel like you really had a path to winning a title. And everybody's kind of sitting there like, yeah, I think conference is gettable. Like I'd rather just stay here.
And listen, that conference has come close to getting two teams in. Like that will happen
Yep.
too. You know, if
No
Texas
doubt.
Tech stays as a power and Arizona State can become a power as they're trying to do. Yeah, that's absolutely possible. I think those are great points. He'd also been very emotional about ASU in the
Yes.
last few weeks. So that was something that came up when I would talk to Michigan alum friends and family about that was like, that stuff is real. I mean, listen, we have seen people do a complete 180 after saying like, I'm not going anywhere,
Right.
whatever, but it does feel like there was like a very emotional and personal reason to want to stay. And it was just about like getting the finishing pieces done with this contract. Michigan is now in a tough spot. I mean, we've seen a lot of former players and current players advocating for Biff Poggi. Maybe you do like a 1-year interim situation like Frank Reich at Stanford. You're shaking your head. I mean, I agree. I don't think it's a great outcome here. I actually think that they should be separating themselves from people from the Harbaugh era.
I agree.
We need a clean break, fresh start. But they still have the same athletic director in Ward Manuel right now. And they're doing these investigations that are going to take some time. We'll see where this goes. But I think you're past the point of like an ideal outcome, unless like you still get Kalen DeBoer, or you still get, you know, one of these big white whales.
So can we talk about the Ward Manuel situation? Because that was another thing that kind of popped up in that conversation. But I think more and more now, coaches really value the idea of alignment and being with people who they feel like are in their corner. I could not see myself, if I was a coach, taking this job right now because Ward Manuel is a question mark to me in terms of his future. And the idea that they are investigating and whatever they want the results to look like or whatever the case is. But just the idea that there's an investigation of their athletic department and how they run things right now. The idea that regents are beefing on Twitter. Like that to me is as big of a deterrent as anything else. Like there are reasons to stay. I think for people who are looking at this job to stay where they're at, there are also reasons to not go, right? And that is a reason to not go.
No, I think it's a really good point. We've talked about this before, even before the investigation. You have an interim president, and then again, you do have this embattled athletic director And that stuff does matter to people, especially if you're going to be leaving a good situation to go there. It's a top 5 job in the sport for a reason.
Mhm.
So there will be people that would take it or would consider it despite all of that, despite the bad timing and all of those things as well. But until someone does, we should talk about those issues and those potential, lists in the pros and cons list, some cons to this job. So we'll continue to cover it. Like I mentioned, if they make a hire, we'll effort to do an emergency pod, at least a short pod reacting to it, and what it means for Michigan. Let's get into these CFP first round games. They're in the books. We'll go in order of the games themselves. So Friday night, Alabama 34, Oklahoma 24. The Sooners led 17-0 in this game. Alabama woke up after a few early 3-and-outs where it looked like it was the leftover from the SEC championship game where they could not do much of anything. And then all of a sudden, the offense got going. Oklahoma did all the Oklahoma things that usually they don't do. They turned the ball over. They made the mistake. Usually defense was sound and they would make a couple big plays and they'd win the game. That's how they beat Alabama
Missing
actually
the kicks.
a few weeks ago. And it was flipped.
Yeah, it was wild to watch it. Nicole and I are in a group chat. And so during the games, we go back and forth and we send our commentary. And I was like 17-0. I was like, man, call it right now.
A lot of people did. I heard from writers in the press box that had pretty much written their columns. They were done at that point.
Mean, it was to your point, it was the exact formula of like this Alabama team who hadn't played well since October, right? And it's like, okay, here we are once again. And I'll point out a couple of things for Oklahoma where I think it went wrong, and then I'll say one thing about Alabama where I thought they were dialed in. So John Mateer, to me, is a quarterback who can put the ball in a spot where it can be caught, but he is not a precision pass locator. So there were a number of balls where wide receivers could catch them, but they had to make adjustments. We saw the one huge drop where that was a really well located ball, but there was another one that people aren't talking about enough, where they hit the middle of the field and split safety concept, and it is literally catch and run to the end zone. And he puts the ball a little bit behind the wide receiver. He has to adjust to catch it, and he falls right after. And that, to me, is where you have this lead and you're able to stretch the lead, and maybe you can turn the mentality of that game even more. And they miss those opportunities. And then once Alabama really figured out what defensive looks they wanted to run and pressure packages, etc., John Mateer could not figure them out. Couldn't read it. It was a pick six play, right? Like just threw it right to the defender because they were dropping guys out from the line of scrimmage, etc. That to me was the biggest thing in the game. Was I felt like they whether it was some of the passes not being right on target where you leave some yards out there, whether it was the mistakes that came in the second half with John Mateer, or I guess late in the first half, throwing the pick and then just not being able to adjust to pressure. That was it. And for Alabama, there is nothing more difficult than staying engaged when you're getting your ass whooped. It is hard to be like, okay, we're going to keep chipping away. Coordinators do it all the time where they feel like they're trying to score 17 points in one play. They start calling it crazy. Defenses go out there and they start, the offense is pointing the finger at the defense, and the defense is going out there not doing their job. Even worse, they stayed locked in. And Ty Simpson was under duress early in that game, and he kept fighting. The wide receiver started catching the damn ball, and that made a difference too. But this was kind of one of those, like, was it a swing point for Alabama? And did they feel like they got their mojo back a little bit? And now do you feel like they're more of a dangerous team? I don't know if I'm quite there yet, but to see the resolve to be able to fight back in that game, I think they scored 27 unanswered at one point. Like that is what you want to see from a team in the postseason, is a mentality that regardless of what they're up against, they can win a game.
Yeah, I agree on all those fronts. And as well as when Oklahoma's Lou Groza award-winning kicker is missing kicks, like it's not a good day. Everything is going wrong that could go wrong. And it did. We also saw a lot of missed kicks in this first round, a lot of field goals missed. But so just kind of underscores that special teams is important in these matchups, and the margins.
So is tackling, and so is catching the football, and so is also like holding on to there were a lot of balls that hit the ground, like,
yes,
forward progress, whatever, and the ball pops out that could have been fumbles and weren't. And if I'm sitting on the sidelines this weekend, one of the teams that had a bye, I'm putting together a whole long ass tape of
Yeah.
like, these are things we cannot do when we go out there because teams get a little bit sloppy when they have time off.
So we'll talk a little bit about what we think Alabama takes from this into their matchup against Indiana in the Rose Bowl. We'll do a little bit later in the show. We'll do our quarterfinal thoughts. But let's run through the other first round games. Miami 10, Texas A&M 3. The score reflects like how little offense there was in this game. Carson Beck finished with like 100 passing yards. Like this was a game that was 0-0 for a long time, 3-3. There was a costly fumble by Malachi Toney, but then he redeems himself with the touchdown late. Marcel Reed finishes 25 of 39, 237 yards, but the 2 interceptions, both intercepted by Bryce Fitzgerald. And then it was really, I think Mark Fletcher was the MVP of this game for Miami. 17 carries, 172 yards. It was like they realized, oh yeah, we should just give him the ball. Like he'll get chunk yardage. Like Miami was doing nothing. They were calling the game very strange. They had like some trick plays. Like it was almost like they didn't trust Carson Beck to go win the game.
Yeah.
And then in the second half, they were like, all right, let's get in Mark Fletcher. Let's just do this, do that, whatever. It was enough to win the game. But that was a strange game too. A lot of missed field goals. It was super, super windy, 11 a.m. kick in College Station. So there was a lot going on and 2 very evenly matched teams. But, you know, we have talked about this with Marcel Reed. There's good Marcel Reed and there's bad Marcel Reed. And both the quarterbacks in this game were capable of throwing a back-breaking interception.
Yep.
And it was Marcel Reed that did it in the end zone, trying to tie up the game at the very end.
This is why we said we didn't trust Texas A&M, right? Like it was, I think all of the why you didn't trust them kind of showed up where Marcel Reed, again, you said it, like productive, had some moments. Certainly you can't throw 2 picks in that game, especially with the you know, nobody's scoring. Like you have to protect the ball.
I mean, and
right?
they were moving the ball, but then they were stalling out, and then we make mistakes. Yep.
Yeah, it's just something you can't have. And I would say the other side of it too is Miami didn't finish their drives either. Texas A&M missing a lot of tackles, right? Like I've said it a million times. I said it when we were prepping for Texas A&M in Notre Dame. I don't like the way they try to defend the run. They're too aggressive in their run fits. And so guys are running up the field. They're creating inverted seams. And you give Mark Fletcher the football, he's going to hurt you that way. And that's what it came down to. Miami was pissing me off early in that game because it was almost like we're not going to run the ball even though it's working.
Yeah.
Like Fletcher, I think, was averaging close to 6 yards a carry in the first half, and they just weren't feeding him. But when it felt
like they were trying to go to Toney, like trying to get him a set number of touches. And they were aware that Malachi Toney was on the field. They were going to defend him and make it difficult for him.
100%. And by the way, like I've sat with offensive coaches, and Urban used to be like this, where Friday night he would go through his sheet and he would put the number of touches he would want certain offensive players to get during the game. So they will call plays. They should have stopped. They should have thrown the sheet away and been like, oh, this guy's running the ball well. But it was the thing that I talked about, as I said. A&M defending the run, it's very hit or miss because they're so aggressive. And when we were previewing this game, the one thing I said is when Miami is running the ball and their run game's on, I like their run game a lot. And that was a hinge point in this game. When they decided we could just run it and we could finish this with the long drive, we could end up winning. That's what they did. Yep,
I agree. Now, I will ask you before we get off this subject, what do you make of Texas A&M season now? Because they ultimately did not beat. Okay, so Notre Dame, that was a good win.
Mm-hmm.
But they did not beat a team in the top half of the SEC, and then they lose to Miami, again, like the bubblest of bubble teams, last team in the field out of the ACC. Is it a successful season for Texas A&M? Like, how are fans going to evaluate that year for the Aggies?
I don't think it's going to sit very well with them. I think there's certainly improvement from that program, right? Like we had talked about this idea that in November they might shut down, right? Because we had seen similar things before, and they
or
did,
just that
right?
like they were 8-4,
right.
Like that was always their ceiling,
right? And so they've made improvements. Now, when you play the great teams, it's when you got to win it. It feels, and this is not the best comp in the world, but it was kind of like the Indiana from last year, where people were like, yeah, you know, got a lot of wins, but like they didn't really beat a great team, like whatever the case is. And I think for Indiana, like you'll take the 11 wins or whatever from last year all day long. I think for A&M, they see themselves a little bit closer to the top of college football than Indiana did a year ago. So it's not going to sit well with them. It's going to be a mixed bag. Like I would take we've improved as a program, and I would run with that all offseason and figure out the things that went wrong. But I could see where if you're a fan, you're like, man, nah, you're pissing me off. We didn't beat our rival. Like, we come in here in the playoffs and score 3 points. Like, it's no good. Throw the whole season away.
Yeah, it was actually like a great weekend to be a Texas Longhorns fan because Oklahoma and Texas A&M both lost within 24 hours. And you're like, great, we beat both of those teams.
So good.
So that was a funny subplot. But yeah, no, I'm with you. I think that fans are always frustrated when their team loses. Like, this happens in every sport. It kind of negates whatever you had done previously. I think like a first round exit in the CFP would do that. Like, we talked about this with Penn State going into last year. Like, what if they had lost in the first round? It would kind of negate making the playoff, because there are going to be places where the expectation is not just to make the CFP. Now, I think for A&M, it's an important step because, again, you had been kind of like 8-4, missing SEC championship games, missing out at like kind of that next step. You have to get there to start. But I like the Indiana comp because I still think it's a huge step. But now you see what you need to do to actually win those games, or to make it like no doubt beat the good teams on your schedule, and then go from there. So I'm with you. I think it's important, but I can understand that people are going to be frustrated. I think they've absolutely got the right coach in Mike Elko.
Yeah.
The question is shoring up the other pieces around it, being more consistent across the board. And then, like you said, you have your issue with part of what their defense does, but they're amazing on third down, right? Like, there's certain things. Keep that. Get rid of that, fix that, and then they advance. So we will be interested to see where Texas A&M goes from here, their first CFP appearance. Now,
call Elko real quick before we move on.
Yeah.
Call Elko and tell him that I will be the tackling consultant down there because they need some help.
Yeah, they could use some work
It is a thing that I bitch about every week. It's so bad.
Yes.
Listen,
I'm sure he's working on that. He's a fundamentals guy.
100%. That's why it's so shocking. Like, I think he'll get it right, but it's shocking to see his team like that.
Agree. But that's true also across the sport right now. Okay, let's talk about the two games involving group of 5 teams. This was the flashpoint that everyone's upset about, because typically this will be capped at one team.
Right.
And it will be moving forward, and the ACC is fixing their tiebreaker and all these other things. Plus, it might just be it's AQs. It's going to be like specifically all 4 power
with that schedule.
Yes, half the league is playing 8, half the league is playing 9.
Doing?
All right, anyway, let's talk. Ole Miss 41, Tulane 10. Tulane's kind of in this for a while. They just couldn't finish drives. Like, they were in Ole Miss territory a lot. They finished with 421 yards of offense. Still got crushed, but they were moving the ball against this Ole Miss defense. So I guess I want to start there. That was kind of what we expected, right? Like, Ole Miss offense, awesome, going to put up a ton of points. They brought back the staff. They're on loan from LSU. So really, like, the big difference was no Lane Kiffin. Offense looked fine, even when they were dealing with some injuries in the middle of the game. Defense still not great. Like, that still feels like the obvious limiting factor for this team as we talk about like the next round and further CFP.
It's an interesting thing because when Lane was leaving, the comment that I made is he probably looked at his team and said that, yes, we're a playoff team, but we're not a real contender, right? And like, that had to be part of the calculus to walk away from a team that was going into the postseason. And people got mad at me. But the reason I was saying that is this defense for Ole Miss profiles similarly to the LSU 2019 defense, right? There's not been a defense that has a team that with a defense that far down that has won a title. And I love Trinidad Chambliss. He ain't Joe Burrow, right? And so to me, this defense is an issue, right? We've watched teams move the football on them all year long. Now, again, when you can hold teams out of the end zone and you can take the football away, you'll live with giving up the yards and try to figure it out. When you play better teams, they're going to finish drives. You see Georgia, which moved the ball against them the first time that they played. Like, they're probably going to finish drives here. So that is a bit of a question. And I'll say this about Ole Miss as well. I felt like there was a bit of a difference with the offense. They were certainly productive, but like, Lane Kiffin's got that, just that ability to hit all of the plays, right? Like the timing of them and calling the shots. It was early success for Ole Miss. And that to me was like scripted in the first 15 and things that you have to get to on your call sheet. And they did a great job of getting to them. Then after that, it felt like a little bit more of a struggle getting up and down the field. And, drives maybe didn't look as clean. I am super curious about a high leverage game against a team like Georgia, whose defense has played much better as of late. Can you hit some of those timely plays where we talked about Lane and his whistle, right? Like he whistles out there and they make the adjustment on the fly and it's a touchdown. I don't know if Pete Golding's got that or Charlie Weiss Jr.
Charlie Weiss Jr.
got that, but they were productive. So we'll wait and see on it.
And we'll get into that game against Georgia in just a second, but we'll wrap up with the fourth of the first round games. Oregon 51, JMU 34. Hilarious late cover by JMU. They scored a touchdown with 105 left to pull within 17 points. So that was kind of the late game drama there. Oregon jumped out to a big lead, was doing really whatever it wanted offensively. Touchdowns on their first 5 possessions, and all of them were 5 plays or fewer to get to the end zone. They were the longest drive in the first, or the longest scoring drive in the first half was like 2 minutes and 37 seconds. It was like peak explosive offense for Oregon. Like this, and not everyone's healthy, but like this is what that offense can look like. A lot of different skill players can beat you. Dante Moore looked awesome. Like he is playing his best. They looked really, really confident. They have 2 coordinators that are pulling double duty. Didn't look like it. They didn't. Well, we can talk about the defense if you have any questions about it. But offensively, they looked fine. So that was about what we expected, right? Like this was the second G5 team in. They would be the team that wouldn't get in if the ACC hadn't done its weird tiebreaker stuff. And so that was about what that game was going to be. Are you concerned about Oregon's defense and like what they were able to allow from JMU when the game was, again, already decided?
So I'll say this. I think it started a little bit earlier than that. I was sitting there watching the game with my dad, and I was like, JMU took the ball down the field early in the game. I'm like, they should not kick a field goal, right? Like because Oregon came out and like 3 plays are in the end zone. Like if they're going to score like that, then you got to try to match points. So threes weren't going to get it done. And they did it twice where they got down the field and then kind of the offense, field gets short, offenses tend to struggle a little bit more. Instead of getting aggressive, they made the field goal and then they had the one that was blocked. And it's just a curious thing to me of like, if they were able to score a touchdown on one or both of those, like, do we feel a little bit differently about Oregon, even though they probably end up winning the game? And it comes down to this idea that the defense was a little bit more porous, and you give JMU a ton of credit because they had a great plan offensively. But they also didn't play well fundamentally on defense. Tackling issues. They had some penalties in the back end where they were a little bit grabby, which Dan Lanning's teams are very aggressive with how they want to defend receivers. So, yeah, I think there's like a little bit of an alarm that goes off for me. But again, a lot of these teams looked sloppy, right? Like everybody had sloppy moments. And I'm kind of just going to chalk it up to, I haven't played in a couple weeks and we got to get the rust off a little bit.
I think that's part of it. Also, like JMU is good, their run game. I mean, we talked about their defensively coming in, which again, they hadn't played, an offensive line like Oregon's or any of that, but they have some good players and some guys that, certainly could move up a level, but might get drafted, might play in the NFL.
No doubt. I was going to say, like, I think for JMU and Tulane, they played very good, right? Like they played as well as they could. And they were just
I thought the play calling, like to your point on JMU, play calling was really good.
I thought both of the teams had good plans to try to go out there, put their players in the best position. As we mentioned with like Tulane, they moved the football. JMU did as well. Like these are teams that were just frankly overmatched. But I think when you evaluate how these games went, like there's a part of it where they were as prepared as anybody else was to play in the college football playoff.
So let's talk about the narratives and the conversations coming out of this before we get to our quarterfinal first thoughts. There was a lot of angst about those 2 group of 5 teams participating at all, which to me, it sort of felt like there were just people who did not want to watch those games. Like they were like, those are going to be blowouts. I don't want to watch them. I am not interested in these teams and what their rosters look like just what I believe they are on paper. And then there was something that was different where like last year you had 4 blowouts in the first round. This year you only had 2, but again, you had 2 with those teams in them. And then I don't even think the other 2 games were all that great watches. Like it wasn't like, the Miami and A&M game was close, which made it an instant classic. It was close because people were making mistakes. It's kind of ugly. Like the play calling was questionable. Alabama, Oklahoma was definitely the best game of the group because it was thrilling and you had a 17-point lead that got erased and all of these things. But again, we talked about the missed tackles and the kicks and all the different things that were happening in that game that was sloppy. So I kind of just feel like the first round was forgettable as a whole. Like that's kind of where I am. And I know that everyone's kind of wondering like, hey, is the CFP broken because of the G5 participation? I push back on that because again, you're never going to have 2 group of 5 teams in it again. Like that was the ACC's fault for that. Right. But I could see the push in the off season for like, they need to be ranked in the top 12 or the top 14, whatever the number of if it goes to a 16 team field or whatever it is, they need to be ranked in that to get a spot. Like I could see there being like a floor set and parameters around group of 5 access. But to me, it's just kind of hard to guard against blowouts in a first round where you are giving home field advantage to the higher ranked teams.
Right.
So like the 5 seed, which by the way, Oregon could potentially have been favored over some of the teams that got buys if they were to play. But so you have a 5 seed against a 12, no matter who is going to be with the game at the home site for the 5 seed. Of course they're expected to win, and they're expected to win by a lot. Like I understand the line could look different than 21 points going into the game, but like you're already putting that advantage on the higher seeded teams with the home field advantage. So you're going to run the risk of potential blowouts or lopsided games with that because you are giving an advantage to a team that is the better team, or at least in the committee's eyes. So all that to be said, Joshua, is the CFP broken? Is the first round broken? Is there anything that can be done to change it? I know you have some thoughts about the G5 teams as well.
I do. So I guess I would start with this. Like 2 years into this expanded playoff, the first round has really largely not delivered.
Right.
And that to me is an indication that we've got too many damn teams in this thing, right? I know it's never going back. So I should probably stop whining about it. But I feel like we are playing these games because TV people said we should, and not because we actually have enough teams that are competitive to win a title. And I think that's where I would start with this whole thing. Like, put the G5 in it, put them out of it. There are not 12 teams in a given year that are all teams that can win a title, period. So I think that's one of the biggest flaws of this college football playoff.
Quick question though. Do you think that in other playoffs and postseasons, every single team that makes them can win a title?
No, but I would ask the question, have we shifted from college football where I think we in the past had completely decided that not everybody could win, and our goal was to have the best teams competing to win the title? Have we shifted now to we want more teams included regardless of their ability? And that changes and this is a semantics thing, but that changes from a playoff to me to a tournament to an invitational, right? Like, I think there's a difference between what a playoff is trying to do and what a tournament's trying to do. A tournament's its own championship, right? Like, it's its own thing. The playoff to me is the cap to the season, the postseason that is trying to find a champion for the season.
Yes, but I would argue that is an invitational. It was a 4-team invitational, and now it still is, because like a playoff to me is something where like you earn your way in, which like there's spots for division champ, wild cards, like there's things where like it's not a human element. But I see your point, and I think that I always say to you, like, it's okay because the best teams will be there later on. Like, They fixed the seeding, which means that we're not going to have that quarterfinal round we did last year, where theirs were also blowouts in that level, and not good games there. Like, these games should be really high quality. And then we should have some really high quality semifinal games, because the best teams will be there at the end. So to me, that argument of like, well, it's too big of a field, it works itself out because you get better games later on. I think
I don't
no,
know.
I know what you're saying. You
I
shouldn't
love the
have to play
idea
those
of
games.
having to, yes.
Yeah, I know, and I
Yeah.
understand that. And like injuries, all of that stuff
Right.
is very real. But like, I watched the NFL playoffs last year, and like all of the first weekend were blowout games. And people don't make it a referendum against like the size of the NFL postseason.
I make it a referendum on the size of the NFL postseason.
Okay, you are one of one. You are one of one.
And I guess my point is, like, I don't want to be more like the NFL. I don't. I think that
I'm just saying for a point of comp,
it's
where
a
like
consumable
people
product.
freak out. But
Yes.
people freak out about the college football postseason
Because it's
and
different.
some of the things that
And
happen.
it takes away what has been college football. I think that's where the freakouts come in.
I think it's such a small sample size that people are overreacting year over year and acting like there's no context ever to any other postseason in any
part of
sport.
our fear as well, and our is the people who are freaking out. Part of the fear is like I said, the NFL, it's consumable. I don't think it's a better product than college football for what I like. Basketball, it's a fun tournament. It's a different thing than what I think we should be doing. And part of the fear is that we get further away from the things that we used to enjoy. Because now when people are having this conversation about how do you fix it, the conversation on Twitter, the suits in the background, what about 16? What about 20? What about 24? That is not a solution.
More teams is not gonna,
that's where I get bothered when I have the conversation. That's not a solution.
Well, right. Or it's just going to have more of these teams that are not capable of winning at all, just playing for longer. And like, again, I think there's value in like what it's doing for the full sport, right? Like, and I know you disagree with me, but like having more games that have stakes that are directly tied to CFP access in October and November, that's been one of the arguments that I have really latched onto about the G5. Like, yeah, okay, people don't want to watch this one game or two this year, that they don't want to watch this Saturday in December. But it made like hundreds of games relevant. And we were following the American race with bated breath. And you're following all of these other games. Listen, I see you rolling your eyes. I see the reaction. But I'm saying like, I know, but that's what I'm saying. Like we've had this conversation a lot. The goal of expanding from 4 to 12 was not the same as the goal when it went from 2 to 4.
No doubt.
That was 2 to 4 was to make sure you were not leaving out a team that could win a national championship. Yes. And your team, the first year of the playoff, validated that, right? So
my team benefited twice. The last year, the watching my alma mater last year, they were a beneficiary of expansion. The last two titles for Ohio State, 100%. I'm with you.
So, but my point is that this one was to allow a team like Ohio State mulligans, to allow that for the teams with the best rosters, and then to include more people, to make it national, to include paths. And I will admit it, right? Like it was set up for a different world. It was set up for a stronger G5 when Cincinnati and UCF and those teams were in the G5 and not in the Big 12. It was set up for a world with the Pac-12 as a fifth power conference, and that Oklahoma and Texas would be coming through the Big 12, and it wouldn't be all SEC, all Big 10, and like one or two spots for everybody else. So I agree. I'm open to the idea of doing something totally different. But I'm telling you that like the goal was not to say like every team that makes a 12-team playoff is can win a national championship. Like we all knew going into that was not going to be the case.
Why did we do it? I'm totally there with you, but
I'm telling you why. There's too many other like interests. If you write everybody off, but if you write everybody off after week 2 of the season, and tell everybody because everyone talks about the playoffs.
Is so crazy to me because I don't know how we got there. Like it was at some point basically like toward really after I left, because my senior year we played lost to Michigan State. Thought we were going to be back in the playoff, and we ended up playing in a Fiesta Bowl against Notre Dame, and nobody was even thinking about not playing in that game.
That changed pretty quickly though. Like And then once
that's what
that
I'm saying.
Changed, it just like it was never going to come back. Now you had teams stopped out of bowl games.
I know, but this sport used to be a sport where there were people that like decidedly they were like, we can win a title this year, and that was their thing. There were other teams that were like, conference title is probably what our ceiling is, and hopefully we can get a New Year's Six. And like that was that.
I know,
And then
but
there were a
now
whole bunch of teams that were happy to go bowling. And people started telling people that, oh, you know what? If you're not in the playoff, it doesn't matter. And that bothers me because we've gotten to this weird spot.
I don't think it's just on the media. I agree that like it's
Oh,
playoff or bust, but like
I don't know.
that. No, I agree. No, listen, I don't
Like
think it's just on the
we keep
media, but
doing
that
this thing where
definitely
we're like,
happened.
oh, what games matter this weekend? The games that have playoff implications. And I would argue that when guys are suiting up and they're putting on their Gucci's and they got their helmets strapping up, the games matter because they're playing the games.
Do. No, so listen, I'm gonna say the media stuff did matter. I did a story on ESPN and the way that they were doing playoff or bust, and this was before it expanded. And they were like, yeah, we need to tone that down. Like, we need to make sure we're talking about more teams and all this stuff. Because remember the commercials, who's in? Like, it was like the only it's talking point. And also, then you also had a period of time where it was like only the same few teams. So you had like 6 teams that were making it year over year. And it was like, you're only talking about like 8 total teams in the sport the whole season. And oh my God, the construction, these guys are right outside my window.
It's all
right
good.
They're literally, I see them. Like, what? Can we go anywhere else in the building right now? Anyway,
Nope,
so my point is that is absolutely part of it. But then I think also you have Indiana coming out of nowhere to make the playoff. Right. And like now everyone thinks that they should. Like it definitely is like there's an internal piece of it now where people are like, well, if they're doing it, we should be able to do this.
I know. I think it's really unfortunate how we have basically we've distilled the sport down into the one thing, and we don't even have a New Year's Six structure that makes sense to me anymore. And people are just like, they're trying to act like these bowl games are not things that should be celebrated. Like imagine being Western Michigan and you had a great year in the MAC, and then you go out there and put belt to ass to somebody in a bowl game. And there are folks that are out there that are like, oh, it doesn't matter. Like that absolutely matters. Neither here nor there. We haven't talked about the G5 thing. I want to get on that real quick. I would ask the question for people who like or dislike the G5, but specifically for G5 people, do you think this is the best way to handle your teams? Because a lot of people have said yes. And I think it's odd that a structure which you cannot viably win a title is a good structure to you. And I'm getting at a G5 championship. And folks are like, we had the conversation where you're like, it's, half the sport, whatever the case is. We've already made the delineation between Power 4 and G5. And we put these teams in here basically to get their ass whooped. And that is the cherry on top to the great season that they just had. That doesn't make sense to me. I know we're trying to avoid lawsuits. It doesn't make a lot of sense.
So, okay. So somebody made a really good point about this because you were watching like FCS games and someone was talking about like, oh, I've always wondered like why, the Dakota schools don't join the Mountain West. And it's like, oh, because like they can sell out their stadiums, win FCS titles, like have such a clear identity and such success at that level. Why would you then go into a world where a bunch of people are rooting for you to get crushed in the first round of the playoff, right? Like it goes to your point. So I do think like the schools ultimately are deciding what levels they want to be at because they could always drop down to FCS. You can change those things. Where I feel on this. I feel like half the sport, you create a new division, whatever, right? But like they're all in FBS right now. So like everyone should have a path. And even if it's like one team that's the best of half of the sport, I'm fine with that. I think it's worth the value that it creates throughout the season and the inclusion and how everyone starts the season with that. I also understand the rosters are getting poached. The coaches are getting poached. It's not the same as some of the powerhouse group of 5 teams that there used to be, like Luke Fickell's Cincinnati team,
right,
and the undefeated UCF teams. I understand all of that, but I just think you have to change Division 1.
I think
to change that.
That's
right,
kind of what I'm getting at. Like
separate. You have to separate the P4 from the G5 formally. If you're gonna,
we've made a decision that those two things are not the same by the way that we refer to them. So I don't think it would be
but that's so colloquial and like
no, it is
a true division line.
But it should be is I guess what I'm getting at.
I think there's people that would agree with you, but I mean I think that would need to be the first step. And then you need to determine hey, are they going to have their own postseason or whatever? But like right now you're basically just like treating them like they're at the kids table
Yeah.
without anything
Which is
formally
unfortunate.
changing.
And by the way, like I also don't think a great reward for having the seasons that they had is like, hey, you get to go to Autzen, have fun.
Well, I would argue if you talk to some JMU people that they were like, we used to be in the FCS and now we're playing in a playoff game.
No,
Like,
I'm
this is
not
awesome,
arguing
right?
that. Like I
Even if
don't
you know
think
you're
that
going to
they
lose.
ever had a viable path to winning a title, and that to me doesn't feel like a great way to celebrate a good season.
Yeah, but again, like I think, when you, and I know you don't like my March Madness comps, but like the mid majors that can maybe sometimes pull off an upset, like they're not probably going to win the whole thing.
This ain't hoops.
I know. I'm just saying, like you don't have to. Not every team that plays in a postseason. Oh my God, they're like power washing my window right now.
It's actually hilarious. Nicole and I, by the way,
you can hear the power washing, right? Like it's literally the window of my office.
No, we can hear it. It's very good. Nicole and I argue about this
just so that you guys can hear the power washing. Because power washing actually is like very therapeutic. They're also ruining one of the screens on the window.
I kind of want to see now that you mentioned.
All right, actually, I'm going to mute yourself. Joshua, do you have any other thoughts on?
Well, no, I mean, I was just going to say, like, this is a conversation Nicole and I argue about like almost every day over text. And I think it's one that people are going to continue to argue about on social media because obviously everybody has an opinion. The thing that I want to say after all of the talk about this is we should not necessarily take this idea of JMU and Tulane getting blown out as an indictment on the group of five. Because if they would have won those games, my opinion would have been the same. Is the structure of the postseason I still don't think is great. And this is just a byproduct of a bad structure. And it's not these teams' fault. We shouldn't like point the finger at them like they did something they weren't supposed to do. It's just the way that this thing goes. But we have to figure out a structure that is more sensible to what the postseason ideally would be. And I don't even know if we know what that is. But let's, as we have the conversation, try to be as respectful of the JMUs and the Tulanes of the world because this isn't their fault.
It's not. And a lot of people are treating them like it was. Again, I'm with you. I think it's going to be a huge offseason conversation. Been predicting that for a few weeks now.
Can I real quick, not to throw off the show. What does Cinderella look like in the 12-team college football playoff era?
Well, people called your Buckeyes last year Cinderella, technically, right? Is it a team that gets mulligans that's really talented?
I think that's kind of what it's at. And
would it be like Miami if they win a few games?
It would be Alabama, right? If they decide to go on a run like it, that feels like Cinderella.
I don't think that that's the same. I think it's more of like if there is an 11 or a 12 that pulls off the first round upset.
Yeah.
But your point is valid that like a team that goes on a little run, we also still call Cinderella, and it's going to be the Blue Bloods that do that.
I'm kind of getting at this point here because I love to belabor points on this. Cinderella was real when we had the regular New Year's Six because it was a one-game postseason and they got to end with that win. And that to me feels really sad that if JMU or Tulane would have pulled off the upset, I still think we would have been talking about how they were going to be a 20-point underdog once again.
So the one thing I will say is that a lot of postseasons end with only one team that ends winning.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt.
So
but
you run into that in a lot of
this was also a sport that was once great for being individual and different, and we have assimilated to the ungreatness.
One shining moment has a lot of tears because every single team except one loses to end their season.
Man.
All right, we need to give it some first thoughts on the quarterfinal games. Now we are going to have a full breakdown that will come out on the 29th of previewing and going deeper into all four quarterfinal games. First of all, I got to say, I'm super excited for them. Like super compelling matchups. I do hate there is one rematch. We'll get to that in the Georgia Ole Miss game, but like these are going to be some heavyweight games. You've got Oregon versus Texas Tech. We'll just go down the bracket in the way that it is organized on the screen if you're watching on YouTube. That one has been like, I'm very excited. Well, actually, let's just go through them in this order. Okay, so Oregon, Texas Tech. I have been super excited for this one because of strength on strength. Like we've talked so much all season about Texas Tech's defensive front. They're so good at forcing turnovers. They're so good at getting pressure on quarterbacks. They have two consensus All-Americans in Jacob Rodriguez and David Bailey. You can argue which one of them has been more important for them, but that is worth every penny. And then you've got an Oregon offense that we just talked about 5 touchdown drives in the first half against JMU, 5 plays or fewer, quick strike, super explosive. I'm excited for that matchup. Like, I think that is going to be awesome. I think that, you've got this Joe Moore Award finalist offensive line for Oregon. It's going to be really challenged. Texas Tech has not played an offense like this. And Oregon's defense doesn't always get as much credit because we do focus on the explosiveness and the excitement of the offense, but that's a team that's really good at limiting big plays from opponents. So as we talk about, because I think that's probably where it's going to be decided, Texas Tech's offense versus Oregon's defense. I think that's an important point. But I'm just really excited because these are 2 teams that are known for one thing, and they're both going to come right up against each other.
It's so intriguing. I think watching Oregon on Saturday, I think they made a point of running the football because people had talked about this JMU defense that was second in FBS and rushing. And I think this is how Dan Lanning kind of is, but I think he's going to try to make a point here about their ability to handle those guys on the Texas Tech defense. And it will be something to marvel at, just the battle there. I agree with you. It is pure strength on strength there. I think I have, more I watch Texas Tech on offense, I think I have questions about them, but also after watching Oregon defensively this weekend, it's not like I'm as confident maybe as I once was. So I think that'll be a unique battle too.
That one will be, I keep forgetting where everyone is. Okay, so that is the Orange Bowl at noon on January 1st. Let's look back at the bracket for next game. Okay, so the winner of that game will play the winner of Indiana, Alabama. That's the Rose Bowl game. Indiana is the higher seed. Indiana is favored by a touchdown. I just Indiana football favored over Alabama football at the Rose Bowl. This one is just really fun before we get to the football standpoint with the backstories, because you have 2 head coaches that have both coached at the other school as a coordinator or an assistant. But obviously, Curt Cignetti had 5 years under Nick Saban at Alabama. Kalen DeBoer and his defensive coordinator, Kane Womack, were both at Indiana in their previous high point of the 2019 season with Michael Penix Jr. So there's just a ton of familiarity and respect, I think, for both places that are coming into this, everything coming up. Indiana, Fernando Mendoza coming off of Indiana's first Heisman Trophy. They are the 1 seed. They're coming into this game that I think is a really interesting matchup, to the point that you made earlier. Did Alabama figure some stuff out? Because they have a really high ceiling. The question was what Alabama shows up, and is their lack of a run game going to be a problem? Is their defense going to be porous? Is Ryan Williams going to be a factor in any of their games? That's been an open question moving forward as well. So there's a lot of offensive skill and talent. Indiana just dealt with a team that had Julian Sayin, a Heisman finalist, and 2 of the best receivers in the country in Ohio State. That's going to be really interesting, and the preparation as well. But this is another one of those matchups for Indiana where, yes, we know they're super well coached and they're very sound, but they're going to be going up against a lot of guys that are going to be playing on Sundays. How do they handle that in the moment? Can they keep up offensively? There's some of those questions as well. And I want to get your thoughts on all of those, but Joshua, are you surprised at the line? It's about a touchdown Indiana. No? Okay.
Nope. Put my money on Indiana on this one. Curt Cignetti is ruining the lives of a lot of people right now. And it's because he is elite at what he does. If Indiana wins this game and continues to make a run, I think that the amount of patience that anybody has is going to completely evaporate, because you go to that place and you make a run at a title. What he has done, I think, is one of the most remarkable things that we've seen in sports. So I just wanted to get that out of the way before we get into really previewing this one. Here's my thing. I think Indiana's defense is going to get after Ty Simpson. I do. Watching them early in the game against Oklahoma, watching what they looked like late in the season, that dude was running for his life. They don't protect very well. And we watched what they did to Ohio State and Julian Sayin, and how they made him uncomfortable and how they were able to get home. And I feel like Alabama is susceptible to giving up some of those negative plays. They have no run game. And we know Indiana, it's kind of the old Nick Saban, Bill Belichick. They're going to try to take away things that you do well. They know you can't run it. Like this to me feels like not just that Indiana's a better team. I don't think it's a great matchup for Alabama.
Yeah, like that's what's going to be really, really interesting because Indiana does kind of live in the backfield, from a defensive standpoint. They're also very sound. They don't blow coverages. They're where they need to be than where the ball's going to be. And you've had Curt Cignetti with extra time to prepare for this matchup because I'm sure they would have been already prepared for Oklahoma if that was the team that they were going to play as well. So again, I think Alabama has a much higher ceiling than Oklahoma. So like there is some legitimate concern, but this is a team in Indiana that has already beaten a bunch of teams with more talent, right? Like they're going to send guys to the NFL now. So like they've developed it, but like talent on paper in Oregon, Penn State, Ohio State, Iowa, like they have won in challenging places. They have done all of those things. So it's hard to bet against them anymore. Like it's not necessarily surprising, but it is funny that they would have to go through Alabama and Kalen DeBoer to do this. Let's go to the Sugar Bowl. This is the rematch. This is Georgia Ole Miss. We talked a lot about this. Like I am definitely concerned about Ole Miss defense. Georgia also, like since they played last, has turned into championship level Georgia, where they are more consistent. The defense shows up for both halves of games and all 4 quarters. And then Gunnar Stockton's really clutch. Like they just do a lot of things in a way that gives you confidence. So like to me, I think that this one is of the 4 games. Well, I was going to say it might be the most lopsided, but I kind of worry about Miami and in their game against Ohio State as well. So ultimately, like I really like Georgia in this matchup because I just think Ole Miss's defense, to your point earlier, is not championship caliber, and this is not a historic offense led by Joe Burrow and a bunch of future Hall of Famers.
I'm with you. There's not a lot that I have to really say at this point. You mentioned with Georgia, it just feels like they're hitting their stride. Gunnar Stockton, I have to say, every time I talk about him, like just does what you want your quarterback to do. He's gritty. He hits the plays with his legs. He hits the plays through the air. It's a defense to me that also is starting to look more like what you would have anticipated. This is a Georgia defense that struggled for large parts of the year to get pressure, to get sacks, to get TFLs. And in the SEC championship game, they did all of those things. It's a scary matchup. And for Ole Miss, like, once again, do I expect them to be able to move the ball a little bit? Certainly do. This is not a team that profiles well to me for making a run. And so I think Georgia's in a much better spot.
Last of the 4 quarterfinals. And again, we're going to go in depth on this next week after we get through Christmas holidays. This is, I think, a very interesting one. Ohio State and Miami. It's a Cotton Bowl. This will be on New Year's Eve. So make sure as you make your New Year's Eve plans, you're adjusting to have a TV so you can watch this one. We had said on Selection Sunday that like Ohio State got the toughest draw, right? That like, getting the winner of the Miami A&M game and then potentially Georgia, it was really challenging. After what I saw out of Miami, I'm not that worried about this game for Ohio State. I just think the way that they were calling the game led me to believe that they don't necessarily trust Carson Beck to go out them and win them a game in a really high pressure situation. They remember those multiple interception games. Malachi Toney is awesome, but it's not like Ohio State hasn't dealt with really talented receivers before. And I just think that Ohio State's offense is going to be able to score, not at will, but they'll be able to figure out this defense and handle the pressure, and they'll deal with, the edge guys and all of that. And I just think that their defense is going to overwhelm Miami. I think like what we just saw from A&M leads me to believe that like Matt Patricia and company are like chomping at the bits.
I'm totally there with you. Like I don't see a world where Miami scores a lot of points. And again, I think for all these teams that we're talking about that didn't play this weekend, like one of the questions is going to be
rust.
Yes, rust, right? Like these other teams figured out, okay, we're rusty here, we got to do this, whatever the case is. So like that I think should be a factor. Regardless, I think Ohio State's defense is going to come out and look the way that they did during the regular season. Like nobody scored a lot of points on them. I just don't see Miami doing it. The one hinge point is what you mentioned with the 2 rushers in Bain and Messidor. Like those guys can ruin your day, and they spend a lot of time in A&M's backfield. But I think after the Big Ten championship, Ryan Day took a really hard look at his offensive line and the way that those guys played in that game and said, okay, we have some things to figure out. And then probably looked and said, even with those mistakes, we were in scoring position multiple times in that game to be able to win. Again, like it's this idea that Ohio State's just a better team. And I think that's where a lot of people are leaning with this one. But also having seen Miami over the weekend, it's like, boy, if you can't muster up more than 10 points, like you're going to be in some big trouble.
Right. I think that's the main takeaway. And there were just like a lot of concerns. Again, like Mark Fletcher was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Ohio State can adjust and figure out ways to take away the best players on these other teams. Right. We've seen them do it before. We also had said going into that game, Miami had been crushing people, but they hadn't played very good teams.
Mm-hmm.
And that changed against A&M, and that will definitely change against Ohio State. So we will go deeper. We will do a little more X's and O's, key X factors, just all the things that you need to know with those two games on Monday, the 29th, ahead of the games, which again are one is New Year's Eve, 3 on New Year's Day, all the typical windows of when those games are going to be played at the Orange, Rose, and Sugar. So it should be awesome. But yeah, that'll do it. I hope everyone has a lovely holiday. Hopefully this accompanied you while you were driving, flying, doing something. Hopefully it helped pass the time. Joshua, Merry Christmas to you and yours and to the little ones. Can't wait to get videos of them opening their Christmas presents. Thank you to everyone who is listening and supporting Rushing the Field. We really, really do appreciate you. Wishing you all the best. We will see you next week as we preview the CFP quarterfinals. And like I said, we'll have coverage all the way through the championship game. Excited to bring that for you. Thanks for listening. This is Rushing the Field presented by Xfinity. He's Joshua. I'm Nicole, and we'll talk to you soon.